I was always hyper-focused on what everyone else was eating and always made sure to have less. If I wanted more food and other people had more food, it felt really good to me because it meant that I had permission to eat more. But if I wanted more food and other people didn't have more, I get super upset because that meant that I couldn't have more food either. So if this is you, if you are like, oh my god, you just totally explained the way I think, you are in the right place, because in this video, I'm going to be diving deep and explain why we compare, how to stop comparing, and how to get over the fear of eating more than others, and what you can do to stop comparing to everyone else around you so you can enjoy your life and eat the food you want without feeling like that has to depend on others' intake. And at the very end of this video, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more of my personal story with comparison, so be sure to stick till the end so you won't miss it. So first of all, why do we compare? Well, I really like Shan Geisinger's adapted flea famine theory to understand the reasoning behind certain eating disorder behaviors, and I'm talking about anorexia and restrictive eating disorders in general. So what this theory states is that anorexia and restrictive eating disorders are an adapted response to famine or food scarcity. More and more research has shown, and honestly, there's really no doubt about it anymore, that anorexia is a genetic illness. Like, they have found so many studies that have proven that people with eating disorders and people with anorexia and other restrictive eating disorders literally have different brain upmakes than normal people, and they have seen huge differences in serotonin and dopamine receptors, which is just basically, there's no doubt about it. So what the adapted flea famine response goes in on is that when you have the gene for anorexia or restrictive eating disorder, orthorexia, or there's so many different ones, and it's a whole spectrum, but basically the theory says that if you go into energy deficit, you spark that anorexia gene, which activates this flee famine response, or this fight or flight response. So if we look at anorexia as an evolved response to famine, we are basically saying that your body is responding to famine and it's responding to food scarcity, and in order to be safe and in order to survive, you have to migrate to where there is food. So if you think about like thousands and thousands of years ago, if you were living in a place and there was no food, so there was famine or there was food scarcity, you would have two options. Number one would be you just stay where you are and wait till the rare case that food may come falling out of the sky, which, like I said, is very rare, probably wouldn't happen. So you'd have to take action, and what you'd have to do is you'd have to go somewhere, so you'd have to migrate to the abundant lands, to a place where there is enough food. So as you maybe can tell, this also explains why a lot of us with restrictive eating disorders, and a lot of us, especially when we go deeper into our eating disorders and lose more weight, why we have this insane urge to move, because biologically, your body thinks that you have to migrate. Your body thinks that you have to move to where there is food because it thinks there's a famine. It thinks there's food scarcity because there is. Your body is depleted of enough nutrients. The exercise piece of this I'm going to save for another video, so drop a comment if you'd like to see a video going in on exercise addiction and how to overcome that, and also the biological reason behind why we feel this huge exercise urge in eating disorder recovery. For now, we're just going to stick to comparing. And before I dive deeper into this video, I want to just say that I really like the scientific models and the scientific approach to eating disorder recovery and just looking at eating disorders in general, because more often than not, eating disorders are just psychoanalyzed, and therapists and people will say like, oh, well, you compare or you restrict or you over-exercise because you feel this deep hole in your soul, and until you uncover what that is, you will stay sick. And I'm not saying that eating disorders are just your body's response, like purely, like definitely our society has influence over our eating disorders, and there's definitely events like traumatic events that happen to you as a child or maybe later in life that can trigger your eating disorder, and definitely diet culture and seeing thin people can trigger eating disorders, but I don't think that's the cause, because if you think about it, we're all exposed to diet culture, we are all exposed to society, we are all exposed to magazines and thin models, yet not everyone gets an eating disorder. So back to the topic of comparison, when we look at comparison from this adapted flee famine model, it makes a ton of sense. Because if you are migrating, so you're migrating with a tribe, so say your family or your friends or your sisters or anyone else you currently feel you need to compare your intake to, you are actually competing with them as the people that are most likely to get left behind when migrating are the people who stop for food. I mean, think about it. If you are in a place where there's not enough food and you need to travel like 80 miles to get to a place where there's food, and time is scarce because you can't wait for days or weeks to not have food, you need to get to those abundant lands and you need to move and migrate as fast as possible. So anyone who stops for food and just sits down and eats some berries, that's a risk that they'll get left behind. And that's a risk for them to not get to the abundant lands first. Because sure, you can stop for berries or just eat some like bread that gets past you along the way, but that's not enough food. So your body is willing to take that risk to skip out on the food now so it can get to the abundant lands first, where there is no risk that a food scarcity or a famine will be right around the corner. This is the exact reason why watching other people eat more food than you feels really rewarding, and it almost feels like you are in a secret competition with them with who can eat the least amount of food. And although this sounds very manipulative and conniving from a rational point of view, from your migrating body's point of view, so from a biological point of view, you are in a competition, and it makes a ton of sense. And the reason why we cannot usually think rationally when we are in energy deficit is because our rational brain is not turned on, our survival brain is turned on, and that's the reason why you compare, is because your survival brain is saying, oh my god, we need to migrate, we need to move. So of course you're going to compare because you're competing with people. So in the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I wanted to share a bit of my own story with comparison, and I was always kind of thinking that I was in a competition with my mom and my sisters and my dad. And I think something that's very interesting is that when I was out eating with other people like that I didn't know very well, I didn't feel as much of an urge to compare to them as the people that felt closest to me. And I think it's very interesting because it totally makes sense if we look at it from that perspective of migrating with the tribe. Because who's your tribe? Who are your people? Well, those are the people that are close to you. Those are your friends. That's your family. Maybe that's people you follow on Instagram that you feel very connected with. And if this is you, if you relate to anything I'm saying when it comes to comparing to other people, then that means you are in energy deficit because your body thinks you need to migrate and your body thinks there's competition. So why does this all matter? Well, for me, at least, when I was recovering from my eating disorder, and I was always comparing everything I ate to everyone else because obviously I was eating a lot more than them because I had to get out of energy deficit. Not comparing was just, it felt impossible. But once I understood this perspective and once I started reading about this adapted flee famine response, I was just flabbergasted because it all just makes so much sense. If this is making sense to you too, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button so I feel empowered to make more videos on this topic, so I know that you guys are interested in this kind of stuff. And when you realize that this comparison is coming from a place of biological feelings of food scarcity, you know what to do about it. And that's why I love the scientific model, because you don't need to psychoanalyze anything and immediately know where your next action step is, and that is to get out of energy deficit. So how do you get out of energy deficit? Well, I think you know the answer to that, but I'm going to say it anyways because maybe you just need to hear that. Well, to get out of energy deficit, you need to eat food. And you need to eat a lot of food. And this is not easy, especially when it comes to comparing, because when you are eating a lot of food, that's when comparison feels the worst. And that's because your body thinks you're migrating. So any stopping for food, like if you're going to stop in the middle of the migration process to like have a feast, your body's like, oh my god, I may get left behind. But that's when you need to remind yourself you are not in a famine environment, you are not migrating, and even though your biological body thinks that, you have to remind yourself that you are in an abundant land already. There is abundant food. So prove to your body that there is abundant food. Prove to your body that you do not need to migrate. So overcoming this fear of eating more than others I highly encourage you to remember that you are an energy deficit and they are not. And our eating disorder can be very tricky in telling us that they are also an energy deficit, but please remember that if you're eating disorder, that is not real. That is not real. To get out of energy deficit, it takes a lot of extra energy, because think about all the years that you have not been eating enough food. And I recently made an Instagram reels about this, so you can head over to my Instagram at livelabelfree to check that out. I just have been loving reels lately, and also I'm so inspired to share more content like this, because no one has to be alone. You never have to be alone. Recovery is a very hard thing, but it doesn't have to be as hard if you have people that support you. So please remember, when you are eating a lot more than others, that this is completely normal, because you are an energy deficit, they are not. And when you have not been eating for as long as you had your eating disorder, or for as long as you have been restricting, you need to make up for all that missed food plus more, because your body has to repair itself. This is also where extreme hunger may come in. And now, not everyone will experience extreme hunger, but most of us with restrictive eating disorders do. And if you are not experiencing extreme hunger, that does not mean that you don't need food, because mental hunger is just as real, and that often can be there for a very long time, and extreme hunger can manifest itself as mental hunger. So I do have a whole blog post on my blog, livelabelfree.com. I will link it below in case you want to read that. And then also, you need to remember that everyone's body is so different. We have different metabolisms, different digestive processes. Like, I have always naturally been someone with a very high metabolism, so I will naturally require more food than maybe my neighbor. And that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me or that there's something wrong with him. It just means that we are unique and we have different bodies and we have different genetics. So this is also the exact reason why I do not share full days of eating, what I eat in a day videos, because for me, they really triggered that comparison, especially when I was deep into my eating disorder, because I would honestly watch what I eat in a day videos only to like justify my food choices. Like, if someone else was eating a lot, I would feel so good about myself and what I was eating. But if someone else in a what I eat in a day video was eating less, I'd feel so guilty about myself, because I was like, oh no, I've eaten more than them. And I mean, if you feel very triggered by what I eat in a day videos, and this is where you have to be brutally honest with yourself and really take a step back and think about who you're following on Instagram, who you subscribe to on YouTube. If these people are posting what I eat in a day videos, or full days of eating, or foods that really are a blockade for you to reach full recovery, I highly encourage you to unfollow these people. And I know that sounds very harsh, but ultimately, your mental and physical health is always number one. So if you're watching people or following people that are bringing down your mental health, or at least triggering you to, then unfollow them. Like, no hard feelings. With that said, drop a comment below what your main takeaway was from this video. Give it a huge thumbs up if it gave you some new insight. Hit that subscribe button to see more videos from me. And follow me on Instagram. Subscribe to my blog. Get on my mailing list for exclusive discounts, bonuses, to get some fun Reels videos, because like I said, I have really been enjoying them. And also, feel free to DM me or send me an email with any topic requests you have, because this comparison video was actually a topic request from many of my followers, and I mean, I couldn't let you guys be waiting any longer. So I love creating content based on your requests, because seriously, that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to show you that recovery does not have to be as hard as it seems, because it really isn't. I mean, if you have the right tools and you have the right people cheering you on, surrounding you, showing you that it is 100% possible, because I promise you it 100% is, then it doesn't have to be that hard. So know that I'm always here for you, and you can do this, and I believe in you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!